My sister stole my inheritance after convincing everyone I was irresponsible. Mom said, "You'd have wasted it anyway." I cut contact for years. Last week, at the family gathering, I pulled up in a $600,000 luxury SUV, and the look on their faces when I opened the door left the entire crowd whispering. I, 32M, pulled into the driveway of my childhood home last Saturday, and I watched through the tinted windows as heads turned. The Bentley Bentega's engine purred like a sleeping cat, all $600,000 of British engineering gleaming under the afternoon sun. I'd bought it specifically for this moment. Not the smartest financial decision I'd ever made, but sometimes revenge isn't about being smart. My hand rested on the door handle. Through the windshield, I could see them all gathered on the lawn for Dad's 70th birthday. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in 6 years. And there, standing near the barbecue with her husband and their 2 kids, was my sister. She looked older than I remembered. Good. Let me back up. 6 years ago, our grandmother passed away. She'd always been loaded, old money from her father's textile empire, and she'd split her estate between Mom, her sister, and a trust fund she'd set up for me and my sister. $200,000 each. Not enough to retire on, but enough to change your life if you used it right. The thing was, Grandma had made me the primary beneficiary with one condition written into the will. I had to demonstrate financial responsibility to the estate lawyer within 90 days of her death. It was her way of making sure I didn't blow it all. She'd seen too many young people destroy themselves with sudden wealth. The clause stated I needed to present a solid financial plan, maintain steady employment, and have no significant debts. I was 26 then, working as a junior analyst at a mid-sized investment firm. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, had student loans I was chipping away at, and honestly, I was doing fine. Not spectacular, but fine. I'd always been the quieter one, the one who kept his head down and worked. My sister was the golden child, the one with the perfect life everyone admired. She worked in marketing for a pharmaceutical company, had married her college boyfriend, and they'd just bought a house in the suburbs. From the outside, she had everything figured out. But I knew better. Her husband had a gambling problem he thought nobody knew about. They were leveraged to their eyeballs on that house. She drove a leased BMW she couldn't afford. It was all smoke and mirrors. When the lawyer contacted us about the inheritance, something shifted in her. I saw it in her eyes at Grandma's funeral. She looked at me differently, like I was suddenly a problem that needed solving. The campaign started subtly. Family dinners where she'd mention how I'd been late with rent once in college, how I'd lost money in the stock market during a practice trading competition in business school. She told Mom and Dad I'd been asking her for financial advice, which was a complete lie. She painted me as reckless, impulsive, someone who couldn't be trusted with money. Mom bought it immediately. She'd always favored my sister, and I'd made peace with that years ago. Dad was more skeptical, but he deferred to Mom on family matters. Within weeks, the narrative had solidified. I was the irresponsible son who'd waste his inheritance. I tried defending myself, but everything I said sounded like excuses. My sister was strategic. She never said anything directly accusatory, just expressed concern. She worried about me. She wanted what was best for me. She thought maybe the money should go into a longer-term trust, something with more oversight. The real knife came 3 weeks before my 90-day deadline. I'd prepared everything for the lawyer. Budget spreadsheets, my employment contract, letters of recommendation from my boss, a detailed investment plan I'd spent weeks researching. I'd even consulted with a financial advisor to make sure everything looked professional. My sister invited me to lunch. She wanted to clear the air, she said. Make sure there were no hard feelings. I should have known better. We met at a restaurant downtown. She ordered wine, was overly friendly, asked about my life. Then, halfway through the meal, she leaned forward with this concerned expression and told me she'd been talking to Mom and Dad. They were all worried about me. They thought I might be developing a problem. I asked her what she meant. She said I'd been acting erratic, missing family events, becoming withdrawn and secretive. She'd heard from a friend who worked at my company that I'd been seen at a casino multiple times. Everything she said was carefully crafted nonsense. I hadn't missed any family events. I wasn't withdrawn. And the casino thing was completely fabricated. But she said it with such conviction, such apparent concern, that I actually questioned myself for a moment. Then she made her proposal. What if we combined our inheritances? created a joint trust that we'd both have access to, managed by a financial advisor she knew. That way, nobody would worry. We'd make decisions together, brother and sister, supporting each other. I told her no, absolutely not. Her mask slipped for just a second. I saw the calculation behind her eyes, the cold assessment of a plan that wasn't working. Then the concern was back, and she told me she was just trying to help. A week later, Mom called me. She said she needed to talk about the inheritance. Could I come by the house? I drove over that evening. Both my parents were waiting in the living room, and my sister was there too. She must have been waiting in the other room because she appeared right after I arrived. Mom did most of the talking. She said they'd been discussing my situation as a family. They were concerned about my ability to handle such a large sum of money. My sister had shared some troubling information. The casino visits, the erratic behavior. They thought it would be better if the inheritance was restructured. I asked what that meant. Dad explained that they wanted me to sign the inheritance over to my sister. She'd manage it for both of us, and I could access funds as needed for responsible purposes. Education, a house down payment, medical expenses. But it would all go through her approval. I looked at my sister. She had this sympathetic expression, like she was doing me a favor. I asked about the casino accusation. Mom waved it off. Someone she trusted had told her. That was enough. I asked who. She refused to say. She just kept insisting that this was for my own good. I told them I wouldn't sign anything. The inheritance was legally mine as long as I met Grandma's conditions, which I had. I prepared everything for the lawyer. That's when Mom said it. The words that ended our relationship right there in that living room. She told me I'd just wasted anyway. I'd always been the careless one, the one who needed guidance. My sister was responsible. She knew how to handle money. This was what was best for everyone. My sister added that she was only trying to protect me from myself. I stood up. I told them I'd see them in court if they tried anything, and I left. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. My sister escalated. She filed a formal objection with the estate lawyer, claiming I'd been engaging in fraudulent financial behavior and substance abuse. Complete lies, but the lawyer had to investigate. She provided false testimony from people she'd coached. She manufactured evidence of debt I didn't have. I hired my own lawyer. We fought back with documentation, bank statements, employment records, testimony from my employer. It cost me $15,000 I didn't really have. The estate lawyer eventually ruled in my favor. The evidence was clearly on my side. I met every condition of the trust. The money was mine, but my family had already moved forward as if I'd lost. My sister had spent weeks telling everyone I'd been deemed unfit. When the lawyer ruled for me, Mom called and told me I'd manipulated the system. I'd fooled everyone. I was selfish for not thinking about what was best for the family. I asked her how stealing my inheritance was best for the family. She hung up on me. My sister tried a different approach. She showed up at my apartment crying, saying she'd only been trying to help. Her marriage was falling apart. They needed money desperately. Couldn't I loan her something? Just $50,000 to get them through? I told her to leave. She called me heartless. Said I'd turn my back on family when they needed me most. I changed my locks and blocked her number. For the next 6 months, they tried everything. Guilt trips through relatives. Sudden emergencies that required money. Dad had a health scare, and Mom called saying they couldn't afford the medical bills, which was a lie because Dad had excellent insurance. I verified it. Eventually, I stopped responding to anyone in my family. I moved to a different part of the city. Changed jobs. Started over. I took that $200,000 and I was smart about it. I'd always been good with numbers, good at seeing patterns. I invested 70% in a diverse portfolio, used 30% as a down payment on a small condo in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I lived frugally, worked my ass off, got promoted twice in 3 years. The neighborhood I'd bought into exploded. Property values tripled. I sold the condo, bought 2 rental properties, and kept working. The market was good to me. I made smart moves, took calculated risks that paid off. By year 4, I turned that $200,000 into $1.2 million. By year 6, I was worth just over $4 million. I'd made it without them. Better than that, I'd proven everything they'd said about me wrong. The invitation to Dad's birthday party came through my uncle. He'd tracked down my new address somehow, sent a handwritten note saying I should come. That family was important. That enough time had passed. I almost threw it away. But then I thought about my sister's face when she tried to steal from me. Mom's words about how I'd wasted anyway. I thought about 6 years of silence. 6 years of them assuming I'd failed and disappeared because I couldn't handle life without their guidance. So I bought the Bentley, paid cash, had it detailed until it looked like a mirror, and I drove to that party. Now here I was, sitting in the driveway, watching them notice the car. The conversations were stopping. People were staring. I opened the door and stepped out. The silence was remarkable. You could hear the wind in the trees. I was wearing a tailored suit, nothing too flashy, but the kind that quietly announced money. My watch cost more than my sister's wedding hat. I'd gotten in shape over the years, worked with a trainer, fixed my teeth, upgraded everything about my appearance. I looked successful because I was. My uncle approached first. His eyes were wide as he looked from me to the car and back again. He asked if I'd rented it for the day. I smiled and told him I'd bought it last week. Thought I'd take it for a drive. The crowd was gathering now. Cousins I'd grown up with, family friends, everyone drawn by the spectacle. And there, pushing through the group, was Mom. She looked older too, grayer. Her expression cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been anger. She asked what I was doing here. I told her uncle had invited me to Dad's birthday. Was that a problem? Dad appeared beside her. He looked at the car, looked at me, and something flickered in his eyes. Maybe pride, maybe regret. Hard to say. My sister was there now too, her husband behind her. Her face had gone pale. She stared at the Bentley like it was a hallucination. Her husband's expression was easier to read. Pure envy. Someone asked what I'd been doing all these years. I kept it simple. Working in finance. Made some good investments. Done well for myself. My sister found her voice. She asked how I could afford something like that. I looked directly at her. I told her I'd taken Grandma's inheritance and invested it wisely. Turned it into a comfortable nest egg. The car was a gift to myself for 6 years of hard work. Mom's face went red. She said I'd told them I needed help managing money. I corrected her gently. I'd never said that. She'd assumed it. There was a difference. The crowd was whispering now. I could hear fragments of conversation. Numbers being thrown around. People doing math in their heads, trying to figure out how much money I had. An aunt asked where I was living these days. I mentioned my neighborhood, an area known for multi-million-dollar homes. I didn't specify that I owned a penthouse there, but the address was enough. My sister's husband asked what I did exactly. I explained that I was a senior portfolio manager at a private wealth management firm. I worked with high-net-worth clients, helped them grow and protect their assets. I'd learned a lot over the years. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mom tried to recover. She said it was wonderful that I'd done so well. Maybe we could all have dinner soon, catch up properly. I smiled politely and told her I appreciated the offer, but my schedule was pretty packed these days. Maybe sometime in the future. My sister stepped forward. Her voice was shaky. She said she was glad I'd succeeded. She'd always known I had potential. That's why she'd been so concerned back then. She'd only wanted what was best for me. The rewriting of history was impressive. 6 years, and she still couldn't admit what she'd done. I looked at her for a long moment. I told her I remembered things differently. I remembered her filing false claims to try and steal my inheritance. I remembered Mom telling me I'd waste it. I remembered all of them deciding I was incompetent without giving me a chance to prove otherwise. The whispers got louder. She tried to defend herself, said it had all been a misunderstanding. She'd been worried. The family had been worried. I asked her if her husband's gambling problem had gotten better. The color drained from her face completely. Her husband stiffened. She stammered, asked what I meant. I mentioned that I'd heard through mutual connections that they'd declared bankruptcy 3 years ago. Lost the house. Had to move into a rental. I hoped things were better now. No one was whispering anymore. They were silent, watching. My sister couldn't speak. Her husband grabbed her arm, started pulling her away from the crowd. Mom tried to salvage things. She raised her voice, said this wasn't the time or place for old arguments. This was supposed to be a celebration. I agreed completely. I approached Dad, wished him a happy birthday, handed him an envelope. Inside was a check for $20,000 and a handwritten note telling him to use it for something he'd always wanted. Just him, not the family account. Just for him. His hands shook as he opened it. He looked at the check, looked at me, and his eyes got wet. He pulled me into a hug, told me he was sorry. For all of it. I hugged him back, told him I knew. Mom tried to intercede, said they didn't need my money. They were fine. Dad quietly told her to stop talking. I spent about an hour at that party. Talked to relatives who were genuinely happy to see me. Avoided the ones who'd taken my sister's side 6 years ago. Made it clear through every interaction that I'd succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, and I'd done it alone. My sister disappeared halfway through. Her husband, too. I heard later from a cousin that they'd gotten into a screaming match in the car before driving away. When I left, I made sure everyone watched me get into the Bentley. I took my time, let them see the custom interior, the level of luxury that kind of money bought. Mom stood on the porch with her arms crossed. She didn't wave goodbye. Dad did, though, and that was enough. The aftermath has been interesting. I've gotten texts from relatives I haven't heard from in years. Lots of apologies. Lots of people claiming they never believed my sister's lies. Lots of requests to get together. I've ignored most of them. My sister sent me a long email 2 days ago. She apologized for everything that happened. Said she'd been in a dark place back then, made terrible decisions. She hoped we could rebuild our relationship. She suggested we get coffee. At the end, she mentioned that she and her husband were trying to start a business. They developed a great concept, but needed investors. She thought maybe I could look at their proposal. I deleted it. Mom left me a voicemail yesterday. Her tone was different from the email my sister sent. She said I'd embarrassed the family, made a scene at Dad's party, showed off wealth in a way that was tasteless. She wanted me to apologize. I deleted that too. Dad called me this morning. We talked for an hour. Really talked, for the first time in 6 years. He told me he was proud of me. Said he'd been wrong to let Mom and my sister control the narrative back then. He should have stood up for me. I told him I appreciated that. He asked if there was any way I could forgive them, if we could be a family again. I told him I'd forgiven them a long time ago. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, though. What they'd done showed me who they were when things got hard, when there was money on the line. I couldn't forget that. He understood. The Bentley is sitting in my garage now. I've driven it twice since the party. It's impractical, expensive to maintain, and honestly a bit ostentatious for my taste. But every time I look at it, I remember the expression on my sister's face, the whispers in the crowd, the moment they all realized they'd been wrong about me. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's just about proving them wrong, about becoming exactly what they said you'd never be. I built a life without them, a good life, successful, stable, everything they claimed I couldn't handle. And that Bentley? That's just the reminder that I don't need their approval anymore. I never did.